The incident happened in 1969, exactly in the year 1969. He was a man who owned a lot of land. He worked in agriculture. He also had many laborers. He had many cows as well. Among his cows, there were 3 that he never used for regular work. These 3 were large, powerful bulls used for fighting competitions. One was named Kalu, one Dola, and the other Shamsa. He used these 3 bulls in local bullfighting competitions. It was seen that these 3 bulls had never lost a single match. Because of this, wherever he went, he would win prizes with them. Among them, the bull named Shamsa was even larger in size compared to Kalu and Dola. These 3 bulls had a special characteristic. Whenever they entered the field, the opposing bulls would somehow become extremely frightened. But interestingly, these 3 bulls had never attacked any human. No such record was ever found. This was a mysterious matter. Why? Despite being so aggressive, they never attacked humans. Not only that, they never rushed toward other bulls outside the arena either. But when they entered the field, they would become more terrifying than even a ferocious lion. It felt as if the ground around them trembled when they started running. Seeing this, the opposing bulls wouldn't even try to fight. They would turn around and run away. And if any bull dared to fight, it wouldn't last even 30 seconds. It would collapse in front of them. However, the 3 bulls never fought together at the same time. The owner understood which bull should be sent into which match. He would take all 3 bulls to the field, observe the opponent, and then choose one among Kalu, Dola, and Shamsa. That's how the fights would happen. And he always secured first place. Everything was going smoothly. There were no problems. The cows were kept in a cowshed that had 2 sections. One side was for the regular cows, and the other side was only for these 3 bulls. There was a fence in between. These 3 bulls never mixed with the other cows. They always stayed quiet and separate. Then one night, an incident occurred. His wife, her name was Motiha, went outside at night to use the bathroom. The bathroom was located a little distance away from the house. To reach it, one had to pass in front of the cowshed. She was carrying a small oil lamp in her hand. As she was passing near the bathroom, she heard a sound. It seemed like someone was talking inside the cowshed. One voice sounded like someone speaking, and several others seemed to be responding in agreement, like saying or making similar sounds. It felt as if a teacher was teaching and students were responding in agreement. She realized that someone was inside the cowshed. She tried to listen more carefully, and then she understood. Said Nana was inside. Motiha Nani already had a suspicion that Said Nana knew or was involved in something related to this. When she realized that he was inside, she went to the bathroom. While returning, she again heard the same kind of conversation. This time, she did something different. The oil lamp in her hand, she gently blew it out. After extinguishing it, she slowly, very quietly, stepped toward the part of the cowshed from where the voices were coming. She went and stood beside the door. The door wasn't tightly sealed. It usually had small gaps, just enough so that the cows wouldn't get out. It wasn't really meant to stop thieves or anything like that. So from there, one could easily see inside. She stood to one side and looked in. Inside, she saw that Dola, Kalu, and Shamsa were lying on one side. And Nana sighed. Nana, what was he doing? He was sitting with a small stick in his hand, pointing at something on the ground. He was saying things like, "This goes here. That goes there. You have to come from here, then go there. and right in front of him, she could see 3 figures. These 3 figures had very long necks. Humans have a fixed neck height from the shoulders, but their necks were unusually long. They were making sounds like, yes, over there, here, as if responding. Their voices sounded broken and sometimes it felt like their words were cutting in and out, like when an internet connection lags and voices become choppy. Or like when a phone call breaks due to poor network of voices seemed fragmented, distorted. It was hard to clearly understand what they were saying. Nana was also speaking, and Nanny could barely catch bits of it without saying anything. She quietly returned to the house, but she did not sleep that night. She lay silently, awake. After quite some time, Nana returned. Then she asked him, "What were you doing in the cowshed? Who were you talking to?" Sighed, Nana replied, "How did you know I went to the cowshed?" Nani said she had gone to the bathroom and saw everything on her way back. Hearing that she had stood there and watched, Sighed Nana became extremely angry. He was already a short-tempered man by nature. He clearly warned her, "Never speak about this to anyone. And in the future, if you hear voices from there, don't ever try to peek or investigate." Nani agreed and said she wouldn't go again, but she understood what was really happening. These 3, Dola and Shamsa, though they looked like normal bulls. Nani was now certain there was definitely something going on inside. That must be the reason why these bulls never lost any fight. A few days later, there was going to be another bullfight in a village quite far away. Nana set out for that place with Kalu, Dola, and Shamsa. When he arrived, he noticed that among the guests there was a man who looked like a respected religious scholar, someone important, like a learned olim. The moment Nana saw him, he felt a slight unease. And interestingly, that man also looked at Nana in a strange way. First, he looked at Nana, then at the bulls, especially at the ropes in Nana's hands. Nana noticed that gaze. Then the match began. The first opposing bull looked very strong. Nana decided to send Shamsa into the arena. But the moment Shamsa stepped in, Nana noticed something strange. Normally, before a fight, Shamsa's eyes would turn deep, terrifying red. But today, his eyes looked completely normal, just like any ordinary cow. Shamsa entered the field. Then something unbelievable happened. The opposing bull charged forward, aggressively, and instead of attacking, Shamsa turned around and ran away in fear. Nana was shocked. This had never happened before. He immediately pulled Shamsa out and sent Kalu instead. The same thing happened. Then he tried Dola, again the same result. For the first time in his life, Nana lost, defeated and confused. He returned home with the 3 bulls. The truth was that religious man present at the arena was actually a very powerful spiritual figure. As soon as he arrived, he sensed something evil. He realized that if someone had used black magic to place supernatural entities inside those bulls, he could temporarily trap them, and that is exactly what he did. For a short time, he confined those entities within a spiritual barrier. But Nana didn't understand any of this. By the time Nana returned home, it was already evening. He tied the 3 bulls in the cowshed. A little while later, suddenly, someone called him from behind. He turned around and saw 3 figures standing there. The same 3 figures Nani had seen that night. One of them spoke. "Do you know, we were trapped for some time." Nana replied, "Yes. I had some idea, because you were not inside my bulls. If you were, they would have won." Then one of the jinn said, "Listen, You know we are of a powerful and aggressive nature. It is extremely difficult to restrain us. That scholar knew he couldn't hold us for long. He only managed to trap us briefly within a boundary, and within a short time, we broke free. But because he forced us out of your bulls, now we won't be able to help you the way we used to." Hearing this, Nana became deeply worried. He went back inside the house, silent and disturbed. It was the first time in his life he had faced such humiliation. He had always won, but not this time. Nani noticed his sadness, but out of fear, didn't ask anything. The next morning, Nani couldn't find Nana anywhere. She thought maybe he had woken up early and gone outside. So she went to the cowshed to release the cattle, and there she saw a horrifying scene. The 3 bulls, Dorla and Shamsa, were standing on one side, and on the other side, where those 3 bulls were usually kept, Nana was lying on the ground, dead. The bulls were tied in such a way that they couldn't even reach that side. They could not have done this yet. Nana's body was in a terrible condition. Nani screamed. People from nearby rushed in. The workers from the house also came. When they examined the body, they saw deep marks like repeated blows from hooves. Muddy hoof marks were imprinted all over his body. His entire body was badly damaged, and when they tried to lift him, it felt as if his body had no bones, as if everything inside had been crushed, turned into something soft, almost like liquid. They took his body away, and arrangements were made for his funeral. And from that day on, people of that village never dared to speak about those 3 bulls the same way again, because they all understood one thing: not every power is meant to be controlled. Some forces are never meant to be used for human gain. What side Nana tried to do was to bind something that should never be bound, and in the end, he paid the price. So remember, never try to trap or control such entities for your own benefit, because they may obey you for a while. But when they break free, they don't forgive, and they don't forget. In the early 1990s, in a remote region of South Asia, far from the reach of cities and modern life, there were places that remained untouched by time. Dense forests, silent hills, and forgotten rivers hid stories that few outsiders had ever heard. The locals believed that certain traditions were not meant to be questioned, and some secrets were better left undisturbed. Near one such river, there once existed a small Santal village. The villagers depended entirely on that riverside spot for their daily lives, washing clothes, bathing, collecting water for cooking, and even drinking water all came from there. They generally avoided contact with outsiders, living quietly through farming, livestock rearing, weaving their own clothes, and collecting honey from the forest. Outsiders were only allowed into the village under strict rules. A few traveling vendors were permitted to enter just 4 days a month, and even then, those days could never fall on a new moon or a full moon. There was another unusual rule: on the day after every full moon, a gold merchant was allowed to enter the village alone. Everything was carefully scheduled so that no outsider would ever encounter another. But one full moon day, something went terribly wrong. That afternoon, a cosmetic seller and the gold merchant both entered the village at nearly the same time, something that was never supposed to happen. The Santal chief, furious at this violation, didn't listen to a single word and drove both men out of the village immediately, angry and humiliated. The 2 men walked toward the riverside, blaming each other for what had happened. One shouted, "You weren't supposed to come today." The other snapped back, "No, it was my day, why did you come?" Their argument quickly escalated into a physical fight. During the fight, the cosmetics seller was badly injured. Exhausted and in pain, he staggered up a little hill near the riverside and sat behind a mound to rest. The gold merchant, after beating him, had already left the place. As evening slowly fell, the injured vendor suddenly heard voices coming from the direction of the riverbank, hoping for help. He carefully lifted his head and looked toward the sound. But what he saw was anything but normal. It wasn't just a few people. Almost the entire village had gathered there. Men, women, and elders stood together, except for the children. Each of them held a burning torch. They were dressed in unusually fine clothes, and strange patterns were drawn across their faces. They placed the torches in rows along both sides of the path, as if marking a route for someone. Then they stood behind the flames in silence, whispering softly among themselves. After a while, the vendor heard a faint ringing sound coming from the direction of the village. The moment the sound reached them, every single villager dropped face down onto the ground, as if bowing in deep reverence, frozen in fear. The vendor kept watching. Soon, from the darkness, several massive figures began to emerge. They were tall, with terrifying horned heads, and their bodies seemed to glow faintly with an eerie blue light. They moved like guards, surrounding a grand carriage. The carriage was being pulled by two enormous buffaloes. Behind it walked a tall figure dressed in a black robe, with a hat covering its head. In both hands, it held a small chain-bound bell, gently ringing it as it walked. The sound the vendor had been hearing all this time. It came from that bell. The carriage slowly approached the riverbank and came to a stop as it did. The vendor's eyes fell upon what was inside, a large coffin-like box, and inside it lay a massive figure, dressed in royal garments, with 4 arms. The sight was so horrifying that the vendor couldn't even move. He held his breath, completely still. Then he saw the guards, the carriage, and the buffaloes come to a complete halt right at the edge of the river. Only the tall, black-cloaked figure stepped forward from behind, holding the bell. It slowly moved ahead of everyone, reached the edge of the water, and dipped the bell into the lake. The moment the bell touched the water, a deep, powerful ringing echoed from beneath the surface. With that sound, something impossible began to happen. The water of the lake started to part from the middle slowly at first, then faster, splitting into 2 sides until the entire lake was emptied. Because the vendor was hiding on higher ground, he could see everything clearly. As the water disappeared, he saw that the far side of the lake dropped steeply downward. At the very bottom, there was the mouth of a dark cave. The black-cloaked figure, still standing on this side, rang the bell again and began walking toward the cave. One by one, the guards and the carriage, carrying the coffin, followed behind it. As soon as they entered the cave, water rushed back from all directions with a roaring force and filled the lake once again, as if nothing had ever happened. The terrifying scene seemed to be over. The vendor let out a quiet breath, thinking it was finally finished. But then he noticed something strange. The villagers were still lying face down, unmoving, in the same position of submission at that moment. From beneath the water, the sound of the bell echoed again, and along with it came a horrifying, bone-chilling scream. The sound was so unbearable that the vendor covered his ears tightly with both hands. It felt as if the scream was tearing through his head. After a few moments, everything suddenly went silent. Slowly, he lifted his head again. The villagers were still in the exact same position, but now, the surface of the lake began to shimmer faintly with light. That faint glow gradually grew stronger, brighter. more intense. Then suddenly, from beneath the water, something began to rise. First came the buffalo-drawn carriage and the coffin. But this time, the coffin was completely closed. Then came the guards, and finally, the tall, black-cloaked figure as it walked behind the others. The vendor noticed something chilling. Small glowing droplets were falling from its body, one by one, dripping to the ground. Even from that distance, he could clearly tell. Those were not drops of water. The entire otherworldly procession moved away in the same direction it had come from, the bell ringing slowly, until the sound faded into nothing. As soon as the bell's echo disappeared completely, the villagers slowly lifted their heads and stood up. Their chief said something, and one by one, each villager walked forward and picked up a single glowing droplet from the ground. They held it to their forehead with deep reverence. After everyone had taken one, the chief, carrying a bag and a torch, carefully collected the remaining glowing pieces from the ground and returned to the edge of the lake. He chanted something softly, then turned the bag upside down and dropped all the remaining pieces back into the water. Without looking back, he led everyone away toward the village, from the light of the chief's torch. The vendor had already realized what those glowing droplets were. They were pure gold. The vendor kept watching the direction. The villagers had gone. Once they were completely out of sight, he slowly lifted his head again and looked toward the lake. The water was calm, as if nothing had ever happened. That night, he didn't dare to move or do anything else. He stayed there and eventually fell asleep. At dawn, carefully avoiding the villagers, he made his way back to the nearby town. A few days later, he told everything to his elder brother. After hearing the entire story, the two of them began planning how to return and collect the gold. On the night before the next full moon, the two brothers quietly took position on a high, hidden spot in the hills near the Santel village. It was a place where they could see everything clearly, yet remain completely unnoticed. They stayed alert, making sure no one could sense their presence. As the night deepened, they grew restless waiting. Just when their patience was starting to wear thin, they heard faint voices. The villagers were coming, talking softly among themselves as they walked toward the lake. Just like before, they lit torches and placed them along both sides of the path, then stood in rows behind them. Time passed slowly, and then, at last, the sound they had been waiting for echoed through the night, the faint ringing of the bell. The vendor gently nudged his brother, signaling, "This is the sound." His brother immediately focused, staring toward the source. Soon they saw it. The same tall, black-cloaked figure holding the bell. In front of it, the buffalo-drawn carriage. On top of the carriage, an open coffin. And inside, that massive four-armed figure dressed in royal garments. Around the carriage moved those same terrifying horned beings, guarding it from the front and back. Watching the scene, the vendor realized it was all happening again, exactly the same as before. Everything unfolded just like the previous night. The ritual completed itself. The black-cloaked figure and the procession eventually disappeared the same way they had come. Then, just as before, the villagers stepped forward one by one and picked up a single glowing drop of gold each. After everyone had taken theirs, the village chief collected the remaining pieces into a bag. Standing at the edge of the lake, he chanted something and poured all the remaining gold back into the water. Without looking back, he led the villagers away. This was the moment the two brothers had been waiting for. As soon as the villagers were gone, they climbed down from the hill and approached the lake. Their plan was simple: whence the chief had thrown the gold into the water. They would dive in and collect as much as they could. The vendor stayed on the shore while his elder brother kept watch. Then the vendor took a deep breath and dived into the water. Within moments, he surfaced, holding a handful of mud. His brother pulled him up, and together they washed the mud carefully in the lake water. And there it was, small, shining pieces of gold. Their excitement knew no bounds. Then it was the elder brother's turn. He told the vendor to stay alert and dived into the water himself. After a short while, he came back up, holding a clump of mud in his hand. Climbing onto the shore, he said in their local language, "Brother, I think I've found a bigger piece this time." With a grin, he handed the lump of mud to the vendor. The vendor began washing it in the water. But what he saw next froze his blood. It wasn't gold. In the middle of the mud, there was a human eye, a large, living iris sting right on his palm. It moved. It looked around, slowly, as if observing everything. And then, suddenly, it turned and stared straight at him. The vendor screamed in terror and threw it to the ground. At that exact moment, a horrifying scream came from the water. He looked up, and what he saw was beyond anything he could comprehend. Beneath the surface of the lake, there was a gigantic face, identical to his brother's. Its mouth was wide open, impossibly wide, and his brother's body was already halfway inside it, being swallowed. The vendor didn't even have time to react. Within seconds, that monstrous mouth devoured his brother completely, and then disappeared back into the depths. The vendor couldn't bear it. Everything went dark. He collapsed unconscious on the ground. 3 days later, he woke up in his own home. The villagers told him they had found him lying unconscious near the boundary of their village. No one knew how he had returned there, or how he had survived. They had carried him home. When they asked about his brother, he told them everything. Shocked and disturbed, a group of villagers went to the Santel settlement to search for the missing brother. But when they arrived, they found something even more unsettling. The village was empty, completely abandoned. There were only a few empty huts left behind. No people, no signs of life. No one could explain where the Santal villagers had gone. As for the vendor, he seemed normal for a few days after regaining consciousness. But then, slowly, something inside him broke. He began to lose his sanity. Eventually, he went completely mad. He wandered around the village aimlessly, muttering to himself in his native tongue. And there was one thing he kept repeating over and over again: there are eyes in the water. There is a mouth in the water. It sees everything, and it devours everything.